live stream, and I just want to check in with my tech team to see if we're ready to go. Great. So now I would like to introduce Monique Booth, who will be moderating tonight's discussion. So Monique works with the Capital Regional District, and she supports education and communications for environmental programs, including the upcoming kitchen scraps landfill ban at Heartland. So ever since seeing Jen and Grant's first film about living zero waste, she has waited in anticipation for this, their second documentary. And she's especially excited to be here today, along with her colleagues from the CRD, because the film emphasizes the often overlooked first R of the 3R hierarchy, reduce. And she's hoping that tonight's film will bolster the profile of reduction, which is less sexier, but perhaps more important than recycling. So please welcome Monique Booth.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for staying for the conversation. It's so nice to see so many of you here. I'd like to invite all the panelists up to join me right now, and just as they're making their way up to this stage, I'll just do a couple housekeeping notes. So if you have comments or questions, you're encouraged to use the hashtag JustEatItFilm. Jen and Grant are here with us through the Twitter sphere, so know that they're watching and reading and anxiously looking forward to your comments and your questions. Here at Open Cinema, we can do the old-fashioned classic, just raise your hand and ask a question, which is great. So we'll be looking throughout after we introduce our panelists for that. And we're just really thrilled that you're here and that the people at Mary Winspear and on Salt Spring Island are here to participate as well. And then throughout the evening, if you have a burning question that you don't get answered or you have a comment, Jen and Grant are available. You can email them directly at foodwastemovie@gmail.com. And although they're busy being celebrities around the world, I'm sure they would take the time to send you an email back. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Jason. He is from Refuse Recovery, and you know all about Jason, and I've known Jason for about 5 years now, and I sit with him at committee meetings, and it is such a pleasure to work with Jason, and I think we're so lucky to have him in this region because he's not only doing all the great things that we want to be doing, but he's championing them in our region, so we're really lucky to have him. A couple interesting things about Jason that I didn't know until I read his bio was that he worked at grocery stores, large department stores, and car plants, and got a ton of insight into our societies and how we waste. While studying international business at UVic, he completed a couple summer co-ops with a company called the Rubbish Boys, which actually became 1-800-GOT-JUNK. So he saw a ton of stuff going into the landfill, and I think it really made him think twice about that. And when he was still young and naive, which you kind of still look a little young and naive, but when you thought you could change the world, you incorporated Refuse in 2002, hit the ground running with cell phone, laptop, and 12 years later, you're living proof that you should be careful what you wish for. So thank you, Jason, for being here. We have Marika Smith. Marika joined the Compost Education Center in 2008 and is currently the executive director. She has a soil science and conservation biology background and is deeply committed to waste reduction initiatives and resource recovery programs. I've been to a number of conferences with Marika, and she will actually bring her Tupperware containers around and take her food waste with her. So she is living, breathing proof that you can basically live zero waste, because I've seen it in action. So thank you for being here. We also have Marita Prato from Life Cycles. She works as the director of Life Cycles Project Society, a local food organization. She holds a master's in strategic leadership towards sustainability, which encouraged her exploration of global economic systems such as the food industry and the response of community food and resource sharing projects that aim to shift the status quo towards well-being. Thank you. And lastly, we have Chef JP Green. When I read his bio, I was impressed because he has won a lot of awards and has studied at very many impressive places, including the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Throughout his career, JP has a keen sense of responsibility to use local products and operate an environmental, sustainable business. He's also had the pleasure of attending a number of events, and I've been to the events that he's catered, and I have never left disappointed. I've always been very satisfied and impressed with your desire to use often local food and the care and effort that you put into it. So thank you for being here. And I know there's also a really neat group here, and I think there's Kelsey from UVic. Kelsey, do you want to just stand up and wave? She is working with UVic on an initiative called the Community Cabbage Project. Is that right? So she would be a really cool person to speak with, and maybe during the discussions you can share a little bit about what you're doing as well. So without further ado, I'm going to open up the floor. If you have a question, just raise your hand, or I'll be looking at the social media people to see if you guys have any questions you want to share with the group. We have a very well-informed, knowledgeable, and good-looking panel, so I'm sure we can keep them busy for the next 20 minutes or so. So I saw there was a question here. I think we have a roaming mic, so I'll just get the mic to come over.
Roaming mic, sound. I've been told to be very aggressive with this mic, so when I put it in front of you, keep it in front of you. Don't talk back over here like this and go over there like that. Keep it right in front of you. Thank you very much. First speaker.
I guess this question is for Jason. I was very excited about the kitchen scrap program through the CRD. I guess is the people that are handling it. Yeah.
Oh, do you want to just pass them the mic?
That wasn't my question, by the way. But yeah, I'm curious.
I'll try and fill in the gaps.
Okay. So it's two parts. First is how much of the kitchen scraps actually get put back into the food cycle in terms of farms and whatnot. And secondly, are there things that people are doing that are sort of wrecking it, like compostable diapers, throwing it in? Does that wreck the entire truck worth of stuff that goes?
I'd say at this point, the most of the compost that is produced from the food scraps goes back mostly into landscaping markets. Now, that's not all of it. We've had a lot of success in recent years giving donated soil or discounted soils to the schools, and they've been doing fundraising programs bagging that, and a lot of people were finding a lot of success filling their raised garden beds with 100% of it. That's certainly what we've done at our farm, and it's we're having tremendous success with that. So again, it's like these programs, the soil market is very new, and I think the value that people put on the benefits of all that is still something that a lot of people have to still experience and learn. And I think the same token that these compost facilities obviously have to be, have to be viable, and most of them depend on selling the soil, which often makes it cost prohibitive for farmers to be buying large volumes. But again, as all these compost facilities come on track, you're going to see an oversupply or a generously more supply of compost out there that will likely drive that cost down and make it more amenable to people using it on farms. But at the same token, farmers are very nervous in that you can't totally vouch for where this stuff's been from. You can certainly never call it organic, even though there's places in the States where it's okay for organic farms and so on. I think in this marketplace, people are a lot more concerned about that, and for that reason, it does have a bit more limited use on what farmers will use on their crops. Yeah, but it's a very small percentage of what is produced now, at least in the Lower Mainland and here on Vancouver Island. A very small percentage goes back to food production. Most of it goes into the landscape distribution market presently.
Marika, do you want to just add a comment about any contaminant, like common items that you see contaminated in backyard composting?
Plastics. Compostable plastics. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a nightmare for consumers at the moment, and Jason and I have both done research on that and published some articles about it. But basically, if you can avoid using any kind of plastic, compostable or otherwise, you got to remember biodegradable just means it'll break down. It could be 5 years, it could be 50,000 years. So buyer beware, basically, and we try our best to educate people about that, but basically, if you don't need it, don't buy it. And yeah, just a reduction of plastics in general.
Great. Next question from the floor.
I have two thoughts I wanted to share, and then I'll ask a question. And the first one was I didn't see one blonde person working in those commercial farms. And who are these people who are doing all the work in the commercial farms? We know who they are. The other one was what couldn't be said in the film, but what came to mind was what about all the countries where they're so hungry and they don't have enough food? Well, we're worrying about waste here. So that was kind of poignant for me. So my question was the comment about the zucchini having to grow so much extra so you could do shoulder. Could we reintroduce seasonal eating? Would we have any luck in doing that?
So I'll just repeat the question. So the question was around introducing or reintroducing seasonal eating so that we could take advantage of zucchini's lifestyle and other food that has a similar lifespan. So I'm sure you two have some good comments about that.
Sure, and I am happy that you kind of brought the comment up around the fact that it is this. I know the film can't address everything, but we do have a broken food system. And so when we look at food systems, we know that we have 1 billion people that are undernourished and 1 billion people that are suffering from too much food and too much of the wrong food. So, from a food systems perspective, there are things we can do as individuals, which were discussed in this film, but we also have to look at what governments are doing. We also have to look at what corporations are doing. And subsidies of a lot of foods are flooding the market, driving prices down, and causing a lot of the problems that we see with both undernourishment and over, I believe. So I just appreciate your comment. And whether or not we can sort of train people to eat seasonally, again, it's the film talks a lot about sort of personal choice and what we can do personally, and I think sure we can shift. We can look at what we can grow locally and start to shift things. And I think already the population of people that are in the room are the people that are already educated enough to go to farmers markets and buy from their local farmer, which is going to reduce waste just sheerly by cutting out, those big parts of our food system, cutting out that supply chain. And that could be one way is to encourage people, yes, to eat seasonably. And I think that one thing that's happening that's quite creative is, like in Victoria, we have the Island Chefs Collaborative. So if we can think about creative ways of taking, everyone's got that glut of zucchini in the summer at the same time. So what do we do with that glut? And farmers, they do from year to year go, okay, we had a glut last year, so what else can we grow at different times? But having those relationships, those creative relationships with the Island Chefs Collaborative, different chefs in town who can do something better than my zucchini bread, yeah, sure. So I think there's lots of creative solutions out there, and that might be one of them, and I'll pass the mic.
I think, as was touched on earlier, it's changing the mindset of the individual person. In the industry, we're starting to see, and have been for probably the last 5 or 6 years, slowly people starting to demand and order more local or request more local as part of their menu or custom menus. But it's such a small percentage that, in my business anyways, with Truffles Catering, our volume is so large that unfortunately a lot of the local farmers just simply can't provide that much. But it truly is something that needs to change on a society level. in order to have significant change. My favorite time of the year is spring, and you see everybody absolutely love spring and want to eat local, and because the creativity is so much easier with the bounty that we have, especially on the island. But come fall, I think people have a lot of difficulties dealing with the squashes and the potatoes and your root vegetables, and it can get very boring. And so that's where that mind shift has to change. You know, maybe you're doing some canning in the spring and the summer to be able to inject a little bit of life into that local fall menu that you're going to have in your local household. But it is changing, slowly, but it is changing.
Thank you. Another question.
Oh, hi. I have a question for the condominium dwelling composters or would-be composters, and I've been to refuse.ca and a couple of similar websites, and I've noticed that the smallest container that I look at is a 48-liter container. So if I live in a condominium, as many people do that have perhaps a Juliet balcony or something like that, and I don't have the capacity to have a container like that, I was wondering what kind of options you might recommend for someone like myself who's looking to compost.
Pass that maybe down to Jason. Thanks.
We're definitely finding as the landfill ban comes on that most of the large apartments or condos or so on through their property managers are reaching out to ourselves, to waste haulers, to try and bring on shared programs within all these buildings. And you're going to see CRD staff, visiting a lot of these facilities, making sure that there's a bin there for people to participate in, or they're going to be subject to fines and so on. So I think you're going to see that infrastructure is just kind of in its setting up phase, ramping up to January 1st. We've supported a lot of people in condos over the years who couldn't get buy-in from their property managers, and they'd be bringing it in their station wagon down to our facility and switching it out themselves. So where there's a will, there's a way, but you're definitely seeing that more mainstream infrastructure going out there that makes it a lot easier to access. Yeah.
Is there any other comments from the panel?
I just want to say, Jason's company is amazing, and curbside pickup and collection of food scraps is absolutely an amazing program. But if you do want to compost on site, you do have some options as well. It's obviously a little harder when you're in a multi-family dwelling, but if you have a balcony, we can hook you up with some worms, like Worm Bin. If you want to share your space with 200 worms, I promise you they won't invade your space too much. They don't want to escape, trust me. But it's just, I see sort of waste management in the CRD and food scraps management as a multifaceted approach. And if you can manage it yourself, we welcome you to explore those options. And then there's amazing companies like Jason's in place as well. So it's just, think about what you can do first, because that is ultimately going to be the most economical and ecological choice in some instances.
Any other question? Perfect.
Thank you. I wanted to say, first of all, how much I enjoyed the film. And secondly, I wanted to ask, do we have an equivalent of the Quest grocery store in Victoria?
So the question is, do we have an equivalent to the Quest grocery store that we saw in the film within the capital region? And I believe the answer is no. No. So, hopefully this film inspires someone with a business sense and a social and environmental sense to maybe take advantage of that.
Can I make one comment? There was an article in the Globe and Mail today. It was something about misfits. It was in Alberta. There's maybe it's Red Hat Society, but basically they're looking at ways to market ugly fruit and vegetables, and they're calling it misfits. And I think they've started in 11 grocery stores, and they're seeing that there's really a market for this. And there was an American food marketing company who said this is the next trend. In 2015, what we're going to see is marketing of ugly fruit and vegetables. So, that's pretty cool breaking news. So maybe we are the next misfits location.
Next question.
I wanted to ask for clarification on what are the regulations around reselling old food from supermarkets, so that when we go and talk to our produce managers, we know what to say to them. Like, for example, I'm seeing definitely fewer of the elderly bananas I used to use in my banana bread available in supermarkets, and I'm suspecting that they're just chucking them. But I'd like to know kind of what to say to those people.
So I think the question was, to reiterate, what are the regulations around donating and reusing food? No, selling food.
Selling old food
Okay.
to consumers.
Selling old food to consumers. Sorry, thank you. And I think we saw in the film there was the regulation around that. There's not a liability around that. That's probably a really good question for the filmmakers because I'm sure they researched that. So maybe we can get our social media group to maybe tweet them to see if they can respond. And then I don't know if our panel has any knowledge about that as well.
One of the projects, and I think one of the reasons that Life Cycles was asked to come here tonight, is we have something called the Fruit Tree Project. And so this year, for example, we have gleaned 32,000 pounds of fruit from fruit tree owners and redistributed that fruit. 25% of that fruit, thank you. We have Renata in the audience who basically organized that project for 7 years, Renata, and I think, she's fantastic. So about 25%, or actually this year, over 9,000 pounds of that went to our social enterprise. So we glean the fruit, and then a quarter of it at least goes to social service agencies, a quarter goes to the tree owner, a quarter goes to our volunteer teams that we organize to pick the fruit, and then a quarter or more will go to our social enterprise. And so what we're doing is gleaning fruit and then selling it to different, spinnakers to make cider or vinegars, different businesses that we're partnering with. So there's no conflict of regulation there. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I know from a gleaning perspective, we are able to be creative, and we're hoping with our social enterprise that we'll be able to ramp that up and continuously fund the project through that. So.
Sorry. Maybe I can would you mind coming up here? Just talking to the mic. We'll have some live action audience participation.
So far, the Superstore will sell expired, or close to expired things. The Root Cellar has several carts of ugly produce, as well as packaged items. And what's the other one? Something. I promise. It's coming. Oh, darn. I hate that. One other place does. I don't think so. Oh, and the Red Barn Market does big boxes of their ugly produce to local farms and even some families. I've actually gone and asked for one of the big boxes, and they've given them to me for free. So there's a couple. I would love Thrifty Foods to get on board. They seem like the most obvious place for that, but.
Thank you. What's your name? No. Thank you so much. You're like an unofficial panelist. Oh, sorry. I think we have another question, and then Marika has something that she just wants to share with everyone. Oh, a random fact. Well, actually, we'll go with the random fact, because now I'm sure you all need to know the random fact.
Okay, so I was at a waste management conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was a company from Vancouver spearheaded by David Suzuki and this scientist, I think he's a scientist, Brad Marchand, and basically they have a company that takes pre-consumer food waste and feeds it to soldier flies. Is that right? Yeah, soldier flies. And then they produce the larvae and they make it into organic fertilizer and fish feed for the fish farms instead of using fish for the fish farms. So they are actually taking the pre-consumer food waste from quite a large number of supermarkets. I realize it's not feeding humans at this point, but it's sort of indirectly feeding them through fertilizer. And I just thought it was a really cool thing. And they've got a depackaging machine, and they're actually salvaging a lot of pre-consumer food waste that right now, because of Canadian Food Inspection Agency rules and VIHA rules and whatever else is going on, cannot be salvaged. So that stood out in the entire 3-day conference to me. So just wanted to share it with you. They're called Enterra, if you want to look it up.
Thank you. Question from the floor.
Last week there was a news item that said that hundreds of people were complaining that the food scraps in their neighborhood smelled so bad. I just wonder if any people on the panel heard about that, and if there's anything that composting facility is doing wrong or could do better, because that would be discouraging, right? To think that it would disturb the neighbors.
Yeah, and that's again, as the compost industry tries to mature, you're definitely seeing technologies and investment go into them that really change the impacts that are having on neighbors, and that's again due to leadership like the CRD banning food scraps. What's happening now is that volume of material that has dollars behind it, as far as people paying to get rid of that forms enough reason for people to invest in better facilities and not just plowing it under the farm, or people cutting corners and all that stuff. So it's again a kind of an industry in its infancy, even though it's hopefully coming back to old school values and the whole closed loop system. These compost facilities that really have gotten inundated with a lack of technology and a bit of greed on the sake of the owners taking too much than they can handle. You're going to kind of see that come to an end as a process starts to evaluate better technologies, and again with the volume in the marketplace to justify people making the right investment.
The filmmakers are ready to respond to that past question.
Oh, great.
Okay.
So in response to the question about what are the regulations around selling old food to consumers, Jen and Grant say that selling food past the best before date is legal in Canada because it's about peak freshness and not about safety. And they've provided a link on their Twitter post here to Government of Canada's date labeling on prepackaged foods. And there's a whole bunch of information on there. So come into the Twitter feed, #JustEatItFilms, to find that link for more information.
Thank you very much. And now you can say you were talking with someone from Amsterdam.
This is sort of like that other question. I'm just curious, when we saw about the dumpster diving rules, was that American? I just wasn't sure what the rules are here in Canada about why are the dumpsters locked, and is it really a liability issue or not? And I'm not sure if the filmmakers might know more about this.
Does anyone on the panel have any knowledge? Jason, yes? Okay, perfect. So the question was around rules and regulations around locked dumpsters.
I wouldn't say that it's really has anything to do with them being worried about people consuming. It's really the nuisance of people coming and making that mess. And it's also about theft of service, we call it in the industry. So if we leave a dumpster unopened and you have a truckload of garbage and you come and throw all that in there, that fills up my bin and steals my empty space. So most of the time it's not about protecting what's in there, it's just preventing other people from dumping in there for free. That's usually the case of why bins are locked out there.
Or dumping sofas and half motorcycles, which we've seen.
I was just going to say I dumpster dived in university, and I noticed, well, it seems like it's changed. It seems like, well, in the film where they showed the fact that they had to go outside of town, they had to have a car in order to dumpster dive. I thought that was, it's a sad reflection on people that can't access that food because those dumpsters are locked, and they have to, if they don't have a vehicle, who can access that food? So I don't know. I think there might be more of a story there too, but I don't know for sure. But I do remember being able to dumpster dive in university, and then all of a sudden bins started to be locked more and more.
Looks like our filmmakers never sleep. They're here again.
Sorry, it's actually not. It's a question from the Sydney audience. They're all watching online, and there's a question that says, does the entire CRD have green bin pickup now?
Well, I think I can say starting January 1st, 2015, so right around the corner, kitchen scraps will be banned from the landfill. So from Souk to Sydney to South Spring Island, it will be banned. So we've been working with lots of the waste haulers and educating residents. So they're definitely encouraged to do so, or they will be breaking our bylaw. And I know that we've had businesses like Jason's that have been championing this type of behavior and service for many, many, many years. This is not new. We're not the first, we're not leading the way, whereas many areas we are leaders. This isn't something that is new for us. In terms of lots of other regional districts and municipalities and cities have banned kitchen scraps. So Jason, you probably have more to add about that.
Yeah, well, just to spell it out, in the municipalities where they have municipal crews going around picking up garbage, they will all be picking up themselves. Places like Central Saanich, North Saanich, not Sydney, but and then the West Shore, Langford, Colwood, Metchosin. Those places are all on their own to hire a private hauler to come and to service their compost or food. We're definitely seeing that a lot of places, especially more rural in nature, where people can manage their waste on site or feed their animals, that unlike in the dense downtown core or even in Sydney where you have that route density and people don't have the yards and so on to manage their waste, that having people have the choice on how they manage it in the other areas seems to be the best approach.
Another question from the floor.
Just a quick one. If it's not illegal to pass on the food, then why is that food not being donated to food banks, etc.?
So the question is, if it's not illegal, why aren't we giving it to the food banks? Right.
Probably a multiple of reasons, a number of reasons. Maybe a lack of organizations aware that they can. It's really awesome to think that you can do everything by volunteer, but sometimes you really do need a structured, paid organization to get things moving. I think we can look to Vancouver, Farm Folk, City Folk, which are doing some amazing things. And in Toronto, there's a really awesome organization that have been around since the 80s called Second Harvest. And we definitely have the money in the city and the capacity to do the same thing, where we can have an organization that's somehow funded through whatever avenues to go out and do these food rescue programs. And at the Compost Ed Center, we have been part of the Plant a Row, Grow a Row project for the last 6 years or so. It's not a new concept. It's out of Winnipeg, where you plant an extra row of food to donate to people in need. And that's fresh produce, but then you take it to the next level and you can add some food rescue organizations to this. So I think it's just a matter of not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but looking to other communities that are doing this really well and figuring out how the CRD can model that, basically, with a combination of community effort.
Did you have something to add? Sorry.
It's such a great question. Why aren't we doing that? You know, we should be doing that. And I think that the cat's out of the bag, and we got to figure out how we can be doing it. But I tend to be a bit of a critical thinker, and so I do think there are potentially some economics around it as well. We know when we have a surplus of things, it drives prices down, those kinds of things. So there's probably some economic reasons behind it as well, and competition and business aspects too, I would think.
I know the answer to this question from the local.
Okay, come on up.
Well, so you just have to differentiate between the perishable and the non-perishable foods too, right? So a lot of the non-perishable foods get donated to the food bank. But the perishable food, there isn't the infrastructure to really handle it and process it. Some of it does get processed, like apples, for example, carrots and things like that. But it's very difficult for places that are totally run by volunteers to receive all of those, almost wilting salads and stuff like that to get them to people, which is really too bad because that from a food bank perspective, you want those healthy foods getting into people because it's, you know, obviously increasing morale and so many different healthy mind, healthy body, you know? So I think it would be interesting to see if there was like more of a touch point for people in need going to the stores to get it themselves. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Random, sorry.
I think we have one more question from the, we have a couple questions, so, okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's just going back to, it's just going back to the last question about vegetable pickup. With the CRD specifically, because I'd heard that the CRD was kind of overloaded with the program, understandably, because it was new and there was so much vegetable waste going. And so that I also heard, and maybe it was just a rumor, that vegetable waste was going to the landfill. It was because they weren't able to deal with all of the waste. So does anybody know where it's going and if it's actually being effective?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't believe anything about stuff going in the garbage, that's for sure. Certainly it was identified as the volume started to ramp up that there wasn't enough operating capacity in the southern Vancouver Island, especially with a facility on the peninsula losing their operating license. And the same thing, they had great intentions, they are great people, but just got inundated with material and weren't able to shut that off and just buried themselves in stink, right? But the problem with, again, is this cart before the horse where the volumes are ramping up, customers are coming on board, it's being separated from the garbage, that volume is being identified there now, and again, there's a real opportunity for people to invest capital now in these facilities. So again, the CRD's taken the leadership to have that system in place with a relief valve to have stuff going off island for now, but at least it's being processed beneficially. And again, they're running a competition now for people to step forward and invest in these facilities.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, a social media question.
This is just in response to a point that you brought up on the panel, and it's from Jen and Grant, and it's up on the screen there, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it. They said one reason we drove over town was because in our neighborhood, the dumpsters are frequented by people who really rely on them.
Great, thank you for adding that. I believe there was another question, maybe that got answered. Oh, here we go.
I just had a question about the upcoming bylaw on January 1st and was wondering if, thank you. I was wondering if the kitchen scraps program applied only to kitchen scraps or if containers of hummus in dumpsters behind grocery stores were also captured by that particular bylaw.
Yeah, it's food waste from all sectors, so residential sectors, commercial, industrial. Yeah, please.
Yeah, and that's another part where I see a lot of opportunity to, again, redirect those resources. So, I mean, we've certainly over the years tried to think, is there, nonprofit groups, special needs groups that could be doing some of that? And you are already seeing Thrifty Foods. They have taken leadership on that, and they are having people come into their stores and do some of this decasing, we call it. At the same time, new facilities are opening up on the mainland that can take all of that material, grind it up, and put it in and separate the plastic out after the fact. Inexpensively, but again, it takes away all that opportunity to provide meaningful jobs and these kind of grassrootsy things. So it's like we're really at a crossroads of these interests kind of colliding with efficiencies and cheap and hey, couldn't we do all these great things over here if we only had the chance, right? So hopefully we're going to be able to see some more kind of crossover between the two sides, right? Because we're seeing the flaws in letting these big systems kind of just try and manage how we get access to stuff.
Oh, we have another question from the floor.
It seems weird. Why don't, instead of it just barely being legal to give the stuff away, why don't we make it illegal to throw it away? So that we develop some kind of huge setup where none of it gets wasted. We can't afford to do this anymore, and beyond food, we shouldn't just be throwing away usable things into the landfill, because we can't just keep filling up, like draining lakes and so on. So I think the food and just all common resources. You know, we need to address it all as a holistic sort of a thing and turn the whole thing on its head. And there's a lot of people that don't have work and retired people that want to volunteer and this kind of thing. And if that infrastructure was in place, I'm sure that people would fill the spots.
Yeah, great comment. Do you want to comment on that, JP?
I think you hear all these, as they were saying in the film, the amount of food that we waste, and it's not going to the mouths to feed all the hungry people. And I think a large part of it, as was said earlier, is purely economics to a large degree. Again, society's mindset has to change before you're going to change big business. And as much as I might get flamed for saying that, it is a reality. And we start to see it. We're slowly starting to see it in a grassroots level. And, you know, I've seen a lot of food fads come and go over the course of the last 15 plus years. This sustainability and local movement it's going to stay. You know, the organic stuff came and it's kind of going away. But this local, sustainable, whether it's energy, whether it's food, whether it's packaging, it's here and people recognize it and people are going to start demanding it more. But as a society, before that meaningful change that you want is going to happen, the whole mindset has to change.
And so we have a food system that's producing twice the number of calories than we need. So that becomes a real problem. And there are lots of things we can do as individuals, and there were suggestions made in the film, but it's going to take a long time before those actions have a ripple effect down the commodity chain, because we have a system that's producing. And the reason that it's overproducing the way it is because for a lot of those commodities, you know, we know this, corn, soy, wheat, those are being subsidized. So instead of farmers being regulated by government, they're being given a subsidy for each bushel that they produce. So until some of those bits and pieces change, so there's change that needs to happen at every sort of step of the commodity chain. And so our actions are really important, but there are steps all the way along all along that commodity chain that need to change, or else we're not going to affect the fact that we have this giant surplus.
Sorry, go ahead. I was also going to add, just in regards to changing society's mindset as a whole, is, you know, starting it with the kids in school. And you take a look at the recycling programs and even the composting programs that some of the kids have in school. And I'm fairly familiar with it, as I'm sure Jason is very familiar with it. It's quite extensive and it's going really well. And those children are going to grow up with that changed mindset, who are then going to teach their children. You take a look at how long it's taken for our basic drinking and driving habits to change over the course of the year. Over the course of the years, that's where it really has to start, and that's where it'll grow, and that's where it'll snowball.
And Jason was going to add, I'll just mention before Jason adds to it, is on the Refuse website, they have some really cool videos of how they've worked with some really big institutions across our region. So they did a video with Rural Roads, and they did a video with UVic. And so I really encourage you to go to his website and look at those videos, because they're pretty inspiring and illustrate what change can happen.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one little thing. I'm sorry. So one thing that I think we can do in terms of this film talks about what we can do personally to change. And I think that when we're disconnected from our food system, it's easy to waste things. So one thing that Life Cycles does, and I think is really important, is to think about that term co-producer. If you've read any Michael Pollan, he talks a lot about that. And that means that we're not just passive consumers in the food system. We're producers. We have gardens. We can food. We do those things. And if you grow a garden, as many of you know how much work it takes. I was an organic farmer as well in one of my past lives. It takes so much energy to grow one tomato. So when you know that, and you've grown one tomato, you're less likely to trash it in the end. And so I think that that food literacy piece and that co-production is really important. And we do that at Life Cycles through our Growing Schools program with kids.
Thank you. Yeah, but like I said, I think we have to keep fighting for the farmers. And just to add a little bit more about this composting and technologies as they change so quickly, thinking about the upside down hierarchy pyramid there, where you had us up top, right where we want to be, right? And then the animals, and then making gas and stuff like that. Well, we're definitely seeing this resource recovery component of composting and anaerobic digestion. You heard about the anaerobic processes there in the landfill decomposition. That's going to put tremendous pressure on farmers trying to get access to that produce and stuff to feed their pigs and to feed their fields as people ramp up to try and produce as much gas as possible. I've visited facilities recently in San Jose where there's a guy going around basically doing what I do, but on a larger scale, picking up food scraps, coming back, and it's all going through quite a sophisticated dry anaerobic facility and producing clean, liquefied natural gas that he's running all of his fleet off of. Again, our farm has nothing to do with that, and that's the challenge. Like I said, I'm worried that gas and level that was below the animals is going to creep up above it with so much pressure for that gas production. So again, it's I think it is in all of our hands just to fight what we think is the right thing to do and not lose track of stuff. Same token, as fuel prices and stuff go up, that all that produce coming up from California is hopefully going to have a lot more of that embedded input cost built into the cost. And make our local stuff more favorable and make people more conscious of truly what all that environmental impact is built into the price of that, right?
Thank you. I think we have another question from the floor. Actually, you know what? Before we go to the next question, could we just I know it's Wednesday, I feel like it's Friday because I'm out this late, but maybe we could get Kelsey just to quickly stand up with the mic and just share a little bit about the project and initiative that she's working on, and then we'll get to that last question, and then we'll see where we are at.
Okay, so I'm from UVic, and we have just recently started an initiative called the Community Cabbage. It was just founded a couple months ago when a bunch of environmental students got together and started talking about the issue of food waste, specifically in Victoria. And it was basically founded by a bunch of people who were living off dumpster-dived food, and they were thinking about how they could bring this to UVic and benefit students. So I was thinking as well, when we were talking about composting and everything, many students are just not educated about the food waste problem. They just don't even think twice about throwing things away. But when you stand right in front of them with a table of food and say, this is free, but it was from the dumpster, they kind of look at it on an angle, it was from the dumpster, and then when you see a whole group of people eating food from the dumpster, it seems okay, and while they're standing in line, eating this food that's actually really good, and they are looking at the food that is obviously edible, we're educating them about things they can be doing to mitigate this issue and other ways to bring more sustainable food practices into their life. And we're basically just starting out. We actually have our 5th meal on Friday, so every Friday we serve a dumpster dived meal, and the rest of our crew is actually out dumpster diving right now for the Friday's meal. But our main goal is not to glorify dumpster diving by any means. Right now we're trying to bring awareness to the campus, provide education to these students about the food waste issue, and then reach out to stores for donations and serve meals from that based off of different initiatives across Canada. There's so many institutions like Sprouts at UBC, People's Potato at Concordia, Carleton, the Garden Spot, that have started very sustainable, low-priced kitchens for students. That's what we're trying to bring to UVic. But first, we do need to build a strong foundation so we can have the means to deal with this huge amount of food. Because, as I was talking about, like the logistics, the economical issues, it is food that from the stores should be put to better use, but there's just not the proper means to do that with just volunteers.
Well, keep up the great work. So do you have your website? Is it?
Yeah, so as we've just started, we don't have a website yet. We have a Facebook page and we have a Facebook group where there's an ongoing conversation about different sustainable food practices, a bunch of Canadian statistics. I noticed from this film, it focused a lot on American statistics, but it really brings it to home. Like, Canadians waste $27 billion in food every year. That's just thrown away, and 40% of all food is just wasted, and all these sort of Canadian-specific statistics. So yeah, I don't know if you guys are connected to Facebook much, but I definitely encourage checking out our Facebook group. We're called the Community Cabbage because it really is bringing everything that this film discussed right to Victoria and showing what you can do to improve the problem right here.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey, for sharing.
Hi. If the filmmakers are still awake, great film, and I think the sign of a good documentary is, people ask, what can I do at the end of it? And so I've heard that a bit tonight. On another slant, this crossed my mind sitting here, hearing this. It could be a different documentary on a different night, talking about the type of food we consume and fill our stores with, and how some of that could be very questionably called food. And if we are pouring that back into the food chain through some of these programs, are there any concerns about that? Like what we're adding to that biomagnification of that into our diet, back into the soil, things that come from across the world, and now we're adding to Vancouver Island soil. Just wonder if there's any question about that.
So the question was around concerns about the content of compost, basically.
Okay, this is all Jason's baby, but from a soil science point of view, one of the biggest things that people have seen in agricultural lands now and finished compost is salt levels. And that's probably from our highly processed food. So that is the biggest thing that I've taken away from most of the research that I've done so far. So it's probably not really surprising.
Yeah, and I think that's really the point that we learned early on in our business too, is that not all food waste is equal. And it is really about, that's really why we've set up our system, that it isn't just going around with a garbage truck and slamming it in and dumping it somewhere. We're dumping each one of these by individually, and we know where they're from, and we have the ability to make certain batches or redirect stuff to make certain soils, and we saw that early on, and it's a very valid point where I certainly watching as this composting stuff has grown at the CRD level. A lot of the politicians with these heartfelt thoughts that the farmers are going to be lined up for all this product and it's just going to be great. Well, most of them don't want it. And it's because, like you said, the high sodium levels, lots of plastics, and it is a very challenging product that you do have to treat with the respect it is. And again, set up the collection systems to preserve as much of that resource value as possible.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think maybe part of your question was also around the ethics of redistributing food that's, not really healthy food. And I do think it's really valid to explore that, because we know that, as someone mentioned in the beginning, we have a billion people that are dealing with food-related illness from eating the wrong kinds of food. And those are people that are marginalized, and those are people that can't afford those healthy foods. So I think it's really important that when we're talking about gleaning and redistributing food, that we're talking about how to do it with those fresh foods, and that needs to happen. And yeah, it's a bigger conversation.
Do you think that the demand would go down if people stopped buying them, and even if it was getting wasted for a period of time, eventually it would just stop being put on the shelves?
Question about supply and demand, basically.
Supply and demand question. Yeah, I do think that that's true. I think it could take a while, and I think that we need to put more pressure on governments to regulate rather than subsidize food, and that really would change. And that was the post-war economy around food really changed from a regulated to a subsidized economy for farmers. So before, they would take grain off the market if it was flooded, put it in a store, and wait until the market could receive it and they could get a fair price for their grain. And then when it changed to a subsidized, it's just, it's unfortunate, but farmers are stuck in this downward spiral where they're overproducing, driving market prices down, but they're stuck in that cycle. So I do think that there's supply and demand, but it's artificially being, the subsidies are creating other problems.
I think we can take one more question from the floor, and then we'll probably wrap up.
Hi, I just had a curious question because I'm new to the CDR program of kitchen scraps. I've always had a compost bin. I've never had to use a plastic bag before. And I recognize that the first thing you guys mentioned is don't put plastics in your compost bin. How do I know what proper bags to buy? You guys have bags up here you say are good that smell of perfume. I don't quite understand or know where to look for those proper bags. It doesn't quite feel right to be giving you my compostables in these plastic bags that you're also telling me not to use.
Right. There definitely is a European and ASTM standards as far as the North America. Sorry.
Sure. The question is about compostable versus paper versus non items for your bin, basically. So questions about why would we use compostable bags, liners, instead of using no bags, liners versus paper or more compostable items.
Or even I have a big bin. They give me a huge bin for my house. Why can't I have one big bag instead of 5 little bags when they pick up every other week?
Sure. So the question about quantities around that as well. So I think it really depends on who's collecting through the collection program. So I'm sure Jason could add some comments about that as well.
Yeah, but there's definitely is some established certifications out there now. The one point that was made was about the term biodegradable. Well, biodegradable and compostable are two completely different things. Okay, biodegradable means it's basically plastic put together with polymers that in the right heat and oxygen are going to let that plastic fall apart but not go away. It's always there. Whereas compostable is just like your banana peel. It's actually a biological process. It's consumed by the microbes in composting the same way that anything you put it as a food scrap in. Still, they're necessary in a lot of applications, but whenever you can avoid using any of that stuff is beneficial. And again, a lot of times it takes a lot longer to break down at these compost facilities than your food does, and a lot of it is going through the screening process and being discarded as oversized garbage anyway. So again, just whenever you can avoid it, you're going to save money, but you really are helping the composter keep a better quality product and not be picking bags out of his conveyor belts and all that extra effort. If you can avoid it, I would encourage you to.
Absolutely. All right. So I'd want to say again, thank you so much for sticking with us to the bitter end. And I know Mandy wants to say a few extra words, but just before we do, can we give our volunteers and our panelists, and especially Mandy, a huge warm applause for our putting together this night.
Thank you so much, Monique. What a great conversation. Thank you for moderating that very skillfully across time and space. So one more thing, we have speaker gifts from Global Village store to thank our speakers for coming tonight. So our sponsor, Global Village Store, always packs up these beautiful little packages, and we never know what's in them. So open them up and show us, please. I'm just going to give you that to hold. So thank you so much to Monique, to JP, Morita, Marika, and Jason. Thank you so much for a really informative panel. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Sydney and Salt Spring, if you're still with us. And thank you to the few folks that we still have on Ustream. And a big, big thank you to Jen and Grant for being up in the middle of the night in Amsterdam. Oh, darn, that sounds tough, huh? To be with us. And are there any last thoughts from Jen and Grant? No? Well, they will be on Twitter if they do. Oh, here we go. I can't stretch the mic all the way over there. They say, thanks, Monique, for moderating and to Andy from Open Cinema for spearheading the Just Needed Film screenings and discussions. So a big thank you from Jen and Grant. Thank you, Jen and Grant, and thank you all, and we'll see you next year. Thank you so much for helping us to connect the dots. Good night.